This is Dialog ASEAN25 with me, Naila Huda. And on this edition, we want to take another closer look at another bloc, BRICS, that's increasingly gaining traction in Southeast Asia, with Indonesia joining in as a full member, Malaysia, Thailand and Vietnam as partners. We're looking at the region carefully navigating the currents of a changing world order. But what's actually driving this region toward BRICS and what's actually at stake? On this episode, we want to take a look at how the economic and strategic stakes are behind this shift, what's actually driving this engagement between ASEAN member states and BRICS. And we want to look at how Southeast Asia is balancing ambition with caution at the global stage. And to help us unpack some of these key questions, we have joining us Anielo Iannone, lecturer in Indonesian and Southeast Asian politics at the Department of Political Science and Government at Diponegoro University. We have joining us as well Dr. Venkatachalam Anbumozi, senior economist and the Director Research Strategy and Innovations at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. And also joining us Dr. Adityo Dharmaputra, lecturer at the Department of International Relations, Faculty of Social and Political Science, Universitas Airlangga. Thank you so much to all our panelists joining us today. Perhaps we can start off with Dr. Adityo. We want to look at the bigger picture of why BRICS and why now? What do you think BRICS actually offers to ASEAN member states that they don't already get from existing multilateral platforms? Adityo.
Thank you so much, Naila, for the invitation. And a very interesting question, what BRICS offer and why now? I think it's very interesting to see BRICS as a sign of status. So there are countries like Indonesia, for example, long touted as one of the leaders of the Global South, one of the founding member of ASEAN as well. But for quite a long time, analysts, scholars have said that Indonesia needs to grow out, bigger than before, and I think BRICS provide that, especially for President Prabowo. For the other ASEAN countries, I think at the moment the world is now changing, right? This is not the same world compared to 5, 10 years ago. Now we have a stronger great power tension between the US and China. You have Russia, you have the EU, and I think BRICS is probably one way for these countries to try to grasp this kind of new world that they're facing now. This is no longer a bipolar world. This is not just a multipolar world. This is not only several countries, great powers competing against each other, but even within the so-called North and South or West and East, there are different interests, different countries with their own interests. And for these countries, for Indonesia, for Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, and all other ASEAN members, they're trying to settle and trying to find their place here. And I think BRICS provide that opportunity, at least one way to look at it. And I'm sure there will be different views towards BRICS as well. But at least for Indonesia, I think this is very clear from Prabowo. This is one way to navigate the world at the moment, but also try to have a higher status for Indonesia.
Anielo, you also recently wrote about ASEAN member states and their engagement with BRICS, and you were a bit more cautious, I would say. You questioned whether BRICS had anything new to offer, or whether it's simply reinforcing new dependencies, as you mentioned. So what do you think BRICS actually has to offer ASEAN?
Well, thank you for the question. Actually, it's very interesting, but I think we need to start to understand that first, what is BRICS and what in rhetorical level BRICS propose. BRICS propose an alternative narrative for liberal global order dominated until now by the West. So it presents what? A vehicle for the emancipation of the global South. At least this is the narrative that BRICS tell to us. So for many Southeast Asian countries, that actually they were in a systemic marginalization in the global decision-making process. This is a very, attractive, opportunity for giving up. I mean, we are here, so we want to make sure we have the right to choose also in the global international order. Nevertheless, we need to also look at the structural level of the BRICS itself and what they offer. what they offer are a little in the truly innovation for us. Actually, so it's not very huge innovation for us. BRICS lacks in a stable bureaucracy compared to ASEAN. There is no binding charter in terms of formal dispute resolution mechanism. At least ASEAN have some the charter or equal representation among the BRICS. So ASEAN, for this old limitation, possess a consolidation normative architecture the BRICS actually don't have. In this now, it's just a narrative for the BRICS, and collective an ethos growing in consensus. So the principle of ASEAN is very clear: centrality. However, concept remains a platform of regional coordination, something that BRICS do not guarantee. So this is the very question: what Africa can offer. Actually, it's just until now rhetoric. In concretic, there is not too much. Actually, there's also some kind of trap to be too much involved in organization like in a multilateralist like BRICS, and might be make a degenerate policy governance for ASEAN. So in the context, let me use this word of multipolarity disorder, where BRICS present itself as alternative platform. International order still is structured around the Western normative and institutional hegemony. In terms of international relation perspective, if you may allow to do this provides not just a superior operational capacity compared to ASEAN, but promotes a epistemologic and geopolitical rupture to challenge the universalism that is centered by the West perspective, the G7, and the dominance of, in terms of currency, the global, the US dollar.
A lot of different views here, but Radityo, if we were to look at this within the wider context of other multilateral platforms, especially Western-led institutions, we know there's the G7, the IMF, the World Bank, and even the United Nations at large is now being questioned, right? Where do you see BRICS positioning itself? We've also just recently seen ASEAN having different sorts of summits, the ASEAN GCC China Summit, for example. Where do you think this fits in the bigger context of how the world order is shifting so fast right now?
Yeah, I think this is a problem for BRICS, right? Where do you put BRICS amongst other organizations? Because as Aniello mentioned before, even within BRICS, there are differences, right? You have China and Russia, very different views, probably compared to India, compared to Brazil. So even within BRICS, you cannot find one single narrative common to all members, especially after they enlarge the numbers of the members. Right now, you have Indonesia, you have Iran, and others. So that's one thing. I think it's very difficult at the moment to see BRICS united as one organization and positioning itself in competition or in cooperation with others is very difficult. But at the same time, I think it's also very critical to look at each country's, or in this case, the Southeast Asian countries' views when they see BRICS. Aniello mentioned before that it's seen as an alternative to the other institutions, right? To G7, to the other. I think at one point in Indonesia, for example, discourse inside Indonesia usually compared BRICS with the OECD as the opposite of OECD. So that you have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you have diplomats, you have scholars arguing that Indonesia still stays in the middle because we joined BRICS but also want to join OECD. So you see that Indonesia positioning BRICS between or in opposite or in competition with OECD or as a different organization. But to be honest, again, if you compare it with the other institution, BRICS, again, just quoting Aniello before, they don't have internal mechanism similar to OECD, for example. You look at BRICS, I would rather position BRICS in terms of geopolitics, probably very similar to how G7 functions, like the elite club of several countries. Now getting larger, not only 5 original members, between 10 or 11 at the moment. But still, it's an elite club claiming to say that they are the representative of the global south, of the developing countries. So you see that they're in opposition to this kind of Western liberal orders, G7 especially there. And you look at how President Prabowo, for example, from Indonesia, when he visited BRICS summit and before that visited Russia, at the same time did not attend the invitation from Canada to visit to join the G7 meeting. That would send a signal that at that point there is this narrative that positioning BRICS on the opposition of the Western liberal orders, which is G7 is the most prominent, especially in geopolitical terms. Economic terms would be very different. I think the other speaker would could probably talk about it more, but in geopolitical terms, you can see that it is seen as an alternative, trying to balance the West, especially the dominance of G7. Now we have BRICS with the elite countries of the global South.
No, it's apparent that each ASEAN member state has their own different way of trying to achieve this balancing act between great power rivalry. Dr. Ambomozi, we want to look specifically at some of the recent moves taken by ASEAN member states, looking at Indonesia choosing full membership in BRICS, and then Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam opting for partner status in BRICS. What do you think drives this sort of differentiated engagement for the different ASEAN countries?
Yes, and most of the countries, that is, they have their own national interest and the national narratives for joining the global governance architecture. And in this regard, if you see, there is the BRICS. It is a kind of an alternative mechanisms that is coming out of this Washington consensus. So when this G20 was formulated and why and where most of the things here in this region only, that is Indonesia was the member of G20 in the Southeast Asia. Only one country that is representing the Southeast Asia or representing small and medium-sized economies in this region. So it is natural when Indonesia is becoming a member of the G20 as a kind of elite group, bringing the global balance for the emerging economies. It is natural for Indonesia to be identified as a part of that new mechanism that is a BRICS. But on the other hand, if you look into the other countries, the Malaysia and Thailand and also things, they are still emerging out, and so they need to find that plus and minuses and the cost for joining that group. Here they don't find much incentives other than like what Indonesia had seen it. And coming back to the previous one, and this architecture is also the global governance architecture, particularly the economic governance architecture is evolving, and so for the countries. For the Southeast Asia or for African Union, and being united together brings a kind of a balance. They can match with these other emerging economies like China and India and Russia and South Africa, and so it makes a sense for them and to be a part of that group. But at the same time, they also wanted to be a kind of a distance. They wanted to wait and see approaches, how it will be evolving.
A lot of things to unpack there, and if you were to look at perhaps Indonesia's situation, just specifically in Indonesia's choice to choose full membership in BRICS, obviously a lot of people are talking about the risk or the threat of retaliatory tariffs as well from the US. President Donald Trump himself has threatened that any country siding with BRICS will be faced with higher tariff rates. But of course, it's not as simple as that, as what we're seeing with different tariff rates for Indonesia, for Vietnam and Malaysia. Aniello, what do you make of this? Is this a threat that should be taken seriously? Should some of these member states perhaps rethink their decision? And what does this say about, the state of the world, really, this sort of retaliation that's so direct?
Yeah, thank you. The question touches the central dilemma faced by the global South and also the ASEAN member. So to what happen if the possibility to diversify access to cooperation without creating or dragging enemy mechanisms from hegemony powers like US. So the answer, for my perspective, does not lie in the statistic cost benefit alone, but is inside the mechanism of historical structural evolution of position that the countries like Indonesia occupy in the world system. So, in my view, the benefit for full BRICS membership, in this case for Indonesia, but also Malaysia, I think next year when if we finish the ASEAN, there might be things to join also BRICS in this point. Diplomatic visibility privilege access to the new development bank participation in the post-Western global narrative are symbolical significant in the structure limited. This would constitute a form of geopolitical, like Raditya said, geopolitical capital and in echoes Indonesia international reputation. Because when we look at the foreign policy of ASEAN, we need to look at two levels. One is prospective foreign policy to outside and the narrative inside. So the narrative inside in Prabowo perspective is very important. What does it mean? Then the perspective is Prabowo is position itself, like Indonesia position itself as a mind actor, no more like a middle power, but an actor that has the state of law, the sovereignty to be part in international order is a narrative inside the domestic politics that what reflects I choose to be part to what? I mean to choose to be big and choose one block because for me might be interesting to see I'm Indonesia, I can dialogate with some emerging power like China and Russia. So concerning what is the risk? Can be like you say, the tariff war started by the U.S. Trump administration. But the first risk of the combination for traditional state partners, such as U.S. Europe, might be interpreted as a formal unlimited with BRICS geopolitical statement. So what does it mean? We are in a period, in an era of supply chain where unclassified politicized tariffs are deployed as instrument of strategic coercion, so dependency. Indonesia, who is remain a very deeply integrated in the Western market until now, could be exposed and is exposed in the external, but war tariff. It might be difficult to be absorbed. So now, for example, Prabowo is trying to negotiate this kind of aspect. The second risk, the second risk, very important, that I saw is alternative dependency. What does it mean? That we see always a dependency from the West, but we not forget that also BRICS might be the vehicle of dependency. What does it mean? This time, the vis-a-vis with China, why hold a dominant position with BRICS? Because BRICS, is not like the European Union where it's more or less very power as balance. Some kind of governance might be consequences problematic for some countries. For example, China choose policy might be problematic for India and for Brexit or India for China. So it's not very a good balance in BRICS. So far from being a space of shared power, at least there is a current configuration. What does it mean? The mechanism for accession, the Chinese influence is not present until now in BRICS. So China, I speak about China because China is the mind in terms of economy, the mass power in BRICS. So, in theoretical standpoint, they might face the two hegemonies without counterweights, where you have a domination of one single country in terms of economy and power, military, and so on, and you have some kind of ASEAN country that are become part of, but just a hold without being really part of the BRICS, just part of in a concert of the departure, but are not integrate. Are just face just show face. So we have ASEAN currently BRICS, but they are not be part completely in the process of BRICS. I don't know if it make any sense in terms of, but it's a matter to say which one of the two BRICS. One from outside the West, one inside from the BRICS.
Now is the coffee break time, and after this is your
Sorry, Dr. Anbu, if you can mute your audio for a while.
Sure.
Sorry,
Anialo, if you want to finish your point.
Yeah. So, in conclusion, membership has the own value, but in Indonesia, because now Indonesia is the only one country that is full membership. The BRICS might be to, challenge to imbalance in the global dependency. Also, if becoming, it might be my point of view, the my problematic risk for part of BRICS.
Radityo, any thoughts on some of these threats, and do you think these threats will continue to grow or escalate as this bloc continues to solidify, continues to strengthen?
Yeah, so I think it is especially if you talk about the coming from the US, for example. At this moment, I don't think anyone knows what Donald Trump will do in the other negotiations of the tariff, right? He threatened BRICS member with an extra 10% tariff. But even with that threat, we don't know whether that would happen, whether part of the negotiation is talking about that at all. So, but because of that, because we don't know what he would do and what he would say, I think the inherent problem with the current situation, this kind of tension between BRICS and the other, let's say with the West, especially with the US, not only with the US but also with the European Union, uh, it's I think it will continue, especially with the inclusions or with more revisionist countries or so-called revisionist countries inside BRICS. We know, for example, in this case, Russia. It's very clear the tension between Russia and the West, with the US, or in most cases with the European Union, which means in the future there will be a problem between BRICS member, probably especially with when BRICS follows the Russian narrative, or follow what Russia wants from BRICS. There is also the case of Iran inside BRICS. We know that there are conflict just a couple of months ago or last month between Iran and Israel, and then you have the US also inserting itself into that conflict. So you have different members of BRICS. And the problem at the moment is that all the outsiders outside of BRICS, especially the countries, big countries, tends to look at BRICS as one kind of with this lenses of an anti-Western. The BRICS is an anti-Western bloc. Even within BRICS, we can see that there are differences, but we cannot control, or Indonesia, for example, and BRICS member cannot control the perceptions of the outside. Countries outside BRICS, their perception toward BRICS is very different. So the threat, the problems will probably continue, and there are ways to mitigate that. There are, especially for countries in Southeast Asia, that most of them do not want a tension between the West and BRICS. Indonesia, for example, already, or President Prabowo said, rhetorically at least, he doesn't want any conflict between BRICS or the US. The way that Indonesia or President Prabowo tries to deal with the US, try to sign the deal with the European Union, with France, there are efforts. And then we can talk about later how this threat can be mitigated. But I agree with Anielo, with answering your questions again. This will continue, especially when you add more members towards BRICS. BRICS itself become more fragmented.
Yeah.
Inside, but from outside, we cannot blame the European Union, Donald Trump, and the US looking at BRICS and see that there are China, because China and Russia and Iran is there, or they are there, and they're trying to look at it as an anti-Western, organization.
Yeah, it really is not as homogeneous. There are really differentiated stances and engagements among each BRICS member. Dr. Ambumozi, I understand that you have to leave soon, but if you can just address one question very quickly. Dr. Ambumozi, if you're still with us. I'm not sure if he's still with us. I think he's frozen. Okay, he has already left, unfortunately. He had to leave. It's okay, we'll just proceed with our discussion. A lot of interesting points there. Just quickly, Anielo, your thoughts on the different stances within each BRICS member? I know we're supposed to focus on ASEAN specifically, but just to quickly look at BRICS, do you think this will become its strength potentially if it's supposed to be, this sort of alternative to Western-led institutions? You would think that it proposes a sort of different power dynamic or hierarchy, or it's supposed to celebrate a little bit of diversity. But do you think that this then poses a little bit of problem to the unity of BRICS, much like how a lot of people point out this concern of the ASEAN unity that has become a sort of central question, especially this year? And with BRICS as well, do you think that would become a sort of Achilles heel, trying to unite a lot of its different positions within BRICS?
Yeah, okay. So let's start it. Probably, if I understand your question, if the ASEAN BRICS cooperation might be a problem for ASEAN centrality. Yeah, I mean, yes. For me, yes. The answer is why it becomes a problem, because one of the risks is the less of a regionalist autonomy that might be created if there is too much involved to BRICS. Because, as I tell you before, there is a very, very huge difference between BRICS and ASEAN. ASEAN was created as a historically concept for BRICS was created is very different. And this might create one of the risks is the less of regional autonomy. So a deeper ASEAN BRICS cooperation might be present strategic paradox for ASEAN country. So in one hand, it could be make a regional geopolitical relevance, as Radito say, in case of multipolarity world. In other hand, the risk of undermine the very fundamental of the historical of ASEAN. So the dissenting actor. So the internal cooperation, the neutrality, so the ASEAN like no interference, a diplomatic centrality. This might be also on the risk, might be compromised by the ammonia ASEAN BRICS position, at least in my point of view. So in theory, great ASEAN engagement with BRICS could serve a vehicle to protect regional position, but influence the global development agenda, including to the construction of a new alternative economy order, also through the new incentive, it creates some kind of let's say nemesis with the US, with the new value against the US dollar. Nevertheless, this perfect scenario depends on two conditions. There's one that includes ASEAN, so the reform and inclusive BRICS, sorry. And the second one is I consider as more strategically international ASEAN. And for the point two, ASEAN need to be rethink itself again, because ASEAN is still stuck in some point in the 20s ago. It's not really some problem also in the ASEAN mechanism itself, so might be changing some perspective also. For go to the point. So the more immediate risk is that the deeper things with BRICS might be create a more intra-ASEAN fragmentation. Yes, evident in the approach of the membership, because Indonesia have an interest to be part of BRICS, like maybe as Malaysia, Vietnam, and Thailand. I don't know Vietnam if I have too much interest to be part of BRICS, yeah, because some kind of also very conflict with China. Thailand, for the Thailand approach of foreign policy completely different from Malaysia approach of foreign policy. It might be different, or might be part of this or not. And when ASEAN countries might start to negotiate individual rather than as a bloc, ASEAN centrality might be lose the bergaming. So what is the question? I mean, it's at the level of engage. Malaysia, for example, do engage very well in terms of foreign policy. In this perspective, in Indonesia might to rethink or might to change engagement with the BRICS. So the foreign policy is very fluid in this level now. So moreover, BRICS, we finish. So maybe Ricky will say something more. BRICS institutional structure still have informal and not based in symmetric representation. So does not engage in regional blocks as one unified entities. but interest with individual nation states. So in terms of governance, this is a maybe fluid logic, and let me see, competitive bilateralism. Let's say competitive bilateralism inside a platform of proclamation of multilateralism. So in this context, you put ASEAN. The ASEAN centrality is bypassing by empowerment in the worst scenario. So yeah, maybe I think you will say something more about this.
Yeah, I do want to quickly return to the question of threats. Radityo, you mentioned some of these risks and threats can be mitigated. How do you think ASEAN should navigate this sort of delicate balancing act without having to face the wrath of tariffs or I don't know what else Trump could pull out of his pockets? But how do you think this balancing act should be played out?
I think one way to certainly Indonesia has a chance as the only at the moment the only Southeast Asian BRICS members. Well, the others are partners at the moment, but Indonesia has a chance to form a let's say the non-anti-Western members of BRICS. So we have Brazil, right? We have Brazil that just finished the BRICS summit in Rio. Brazil has a very different views compared to what Russia and China has been doing in BRICS. We have India, right? We have India, we have Brazil. Other countries inside BRICS might have a similar or closer positions on many issues to Indonesia and other countries in Southeast Asia. The challenge is because there are two big countries, the so-called revisionist big countries inside BRICS that seems to, or from outside perspective at least, seems to direct the you know the future trajectory of BRICS. But so Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, all the other partners of BRICS here, might then promote the agenda that actually try to bridge this, global South and the West instead of following only the bigger countries like China and Russia. I think there is a way in terms of building solidarity with Brazil, with India, with I think the other countries there are Egypt. So there are other BRICS members outside of the two big powers there. The problem with trying to build that is now you have to ask the ASEAN member states whether they actually want to do that. Because at the moment they're not really working in unison, as Anielo mentioned, right? All these ASEAN members said they deal with it, case by case, individually. Indonesia, instead of using ASEAN and BRICS to deal with the US, Indonesia went there alone. Vietnam deal with the US alone. And then we have bilateral negotiation with Trump, even probably personal negotiation with President Trump, for example, Prabowo and Trump, and then we got a deal. That deal is probably very different for Indonesia and for Vietnam and for the other ASEAN members. So there is a problem that I still think we can mitigate that by moving as a coordinated ASEAN strategy in BRICS. Trying to also engage with the other powers there. But as I said before, the problem is that we do not move as one, coordination ASEAN-led mechanism there. It's just individual member states trying to deal with BRICS, trying to deal with the US, and I think that, as I agree with Daniel, that weakens this ASEAN centrality. If only they try to look at it as an ASEAN members instead of as individuals. But probably it's very difficult at the moment because now we didn't even touch how each country's view ASEAN could be very different. President Prabowo at the moment look at ASEAN in a very different way compared to President Jokowi and the other Indonesian president before. There was this talk about the competing suns inside ASEAN between Indonesia and Malaysia, and there is always this kind of narrative that ASEAN is not really in one voice, especially regarding to BRICS, and I think that weakens our bargaining position. Um, I think Aniello wrote a very interesting and excellent article about that ASEAN centrality would be, diminished because ASEAN would just be a symbol, because we are part of BRICS and the other countries in BRICS, especially the great powers, will say, yeah, we invited all of you guys here, but we don't have the voice. So that is the challenge now. We can mitigate it by working together. I would still argue that.
Hmm. I think there may have been attempts to sort of coordinate this united front. I think as chair of ASEAN, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has tried or attempted to send a letter to President Trump. This was before the recent announcement in representing the whole of the bloc in trying to negotiate the tariffs as one united front. But as you said, the responses from just within ASEAN has been a little bit, I guess, lukewarm. There hasn't been a lot of, I guess, cooperation there. Aniello, your thoughts on this? I guess Radityo is a bit on the optimistic side in saying that, cooperation, coordination is the key to mitigating some of these threats. But if push comes to shove, do you think that, more instability, uncertainty, more retaliation, and I guess the side effects from this great power rivalry, if it comes to shove, do you think that ASEAN will be forced to work together in trying to work together either within the ASEAN framework or the BRICS framework, or in trying to negotiating these tariffs? What do you think it would take to, I guess, develop a more united front, Aniello?
Well, personally, the first question is, has it be ASEAN be united before or not? My question being not. But maybe the core of the question, and I think the question is the heart of the structural condition now in Southeast Asian region is define themselves today. I mean, is how to preserve strategic autonomy in the end, and it's an international system wherein we are in international system and is in crisis, in the logic of the West versus BRICS. So, my point of view, the answer is not to avoid it's not to avoid, let's say, sorry, I forgot the word in English.
Can use Indonesian as well. I believe we might all understand.
Sorry, the word aliansi, aliansi per se, but to reformulate into a post-bipolar terms. What does that mean? In other terms, the challenge is not to remain neutral, but to create a form of autonomous strategic position. This actually is trying to do in Indonesia now. That is selective. So ASEAN country must become, the archive of this own position, not merely a rhetoric, but in systemic pressure. This means to create a more centrality. The question is, the perception of ASEAN in ASEAN countries is different. I mean, Philippines has their own idea of ASEAN. It's not really regarded to as centralities, but they more look on foreign policy for US. Singapore, maybe it's the only country in ASEAN that believe in a centrality. The other actors are rational actors. They think they to maximize their own interests. Malaysia is a very important role, I guess, because with Anwar might be, the bridge might be connected to the theory to practice, but might be still challenge and prospect because ASEAN, in terms of unity, we can speak a lot about ASEAN way, ASEAN unity now. So maybe it's a story for the time. So there is, three core problem for me in this way. So the transformation of balancing into strategy agency, and we now see in the oscillating between China and US. So it's no longer sufficient for some countries. So ASEAN must to be shifted into a defensive posture to practice conscience or regional autonomy. Where they present themselves not as just a player in the international order, but the advocacy of the all global governance agenda. So it's this is the the unity. The second point is institutionalism, multi-positionality. What does it mean? So there is contradictory about the participation in multi-global platforms. So ASEAN might participate in BRICS, but can ASEAN now participate in G20, for example, or in other societies? So provide this plurality is coordinated through a principle of international normative consistency. ASEAN state should, start to establish a common framework that until now ASEAN don't have. So in a sense, this is about giving institutional shape to a flexibility among the drift into the fragmentation of ASEAN. And the third point, I think the important one is to make a collective agenda real, because until now it's just on in the dialogue aspect, but it's non-concretely real. So the real challenge is both political and symbolic, is to be a really concrete agency. ASEAN must be must be active as ASEAN, because if you were now to think that every country in ASEAN might to be judged as a single state, like I have to say, it's not a centrality. So what does it mean that, and this is very, very dangerous. The main interest of some countries in ASEAN might be full membership, might be in contradiction with other countries are not part of ASEAN, but are part of BRICS. So it becomes problematic in this perspective. So try just to figure out the situation. For example, Indonesia as kind of agency might be problematic for Singapore. That's not part of BRICS. So it might be also problematic in this perspective. So a common narrative is needed for ASEAN no buffer zone between powers, to not be stuck in the moral and normative center between ASEAN multipolarism. Sorry, I have to be too fast. And it's in conclusion, I mean, it's the challenge and when you are going to deal with the great powers now to be too sure. In this perspective, Indonesia is the only one, and this is my personal opinion, that have choose one block, not just in terms of deny or the no interference policy, but choose one block, choose one view of the world. Is a narrative strong, especially when it comes from the major candidates. So we're gonna see a lot of stuff in the coming days for sure.
For sure. No, you mentioned a lot of really critical and interesting points there. You talked about sort of developing this common framework, about crafting this sort of collective agenda that's still missing, that's still lacking in the ASEAN framework. Radityo, your thoughts on this? There's a lot of talk about carving this third way in global politics, and some people, some scholars are looking to ASEAN, to BRICS, the GCC, China cooperation. There's been a lot of examples for this, but at the end of the day, it does boil down to incentive, to or political will really of these ASEAN member states, and whether they really want to develop this sort of united front, this collective agenda. Looking at, I guess, the leadership, the current leadership in ASEAN, and I guess some of the internal issues that they're currently faced with. I mean, just looking at the Myanmar crisis is already still a predicament and still a very thorny issue for a lot of ASEAN member states. Do you think it is possible to sort of develop this collective agenda, this common framework?
I mean, in my previous answer, I seem to be more optimistic, as you said.
Yeah.
But looking at the real situation at the moment, looking at how, for example, how President Prabowo, the Indonesian president, as the largest ASEAN, the only G20 members, and so on, uh, the way he looked at ASEAN, the way he just, he didn't attend some of the Indonesian representatives didn't attend some of the meeting, the way that Prabowo looked beyond ASEAN for recognitions, for status, it is very difficult to just, to bring him back. Now he get the taste of, meeting with Trump, or not yet meeting with Trump, meeting with Putin, uh, meeting with all the leaders, you know, outside of ASEAN. And it is, I think, will be very difficult to convince him or Indonesia to just, go back to the roots and deal with other ASEAN members. You mentioned Myanmar crisis. Now there is a real conflict just broke up in us. It just broke out in ASEAN, right, at the moment, and that is actually a chance for other countries, just to look at ASEAN, for ASEAN members to just look inside instead of just, instead of aiming bigger. Maybe just start from the basic, that we managed to deal with this conflict before in the 80s, in the 90s. Now we need to go back to that route instead of going up there, because it is at the moment, I think it's very difficult to see that. Anwar, Prime Minister Anwar, and you know uh, Malaysia's chairmanship, I think it's very crucial. But the problem with this, with all the effort that Anwar already tried, is that the other part here is Prabowo, right? So if you can combine Malaysia and Indonesia working together inside ASEAN, that could probably move ASEAN into one position, at least to some extent. But at the moment, it's not working in that sense, in that direction. So that would be a challenge. I would be more pessimistic, especially trying to convince President Prabowo to just go back to ASEAN, not going out there first, and then just try to have this common framework that Anielo mentioned inside ASEAN. Uh, not even mentioning common framework when we deal with BRICS, for example. That would be the next step. But just common framework inside, especially with the great power tensions. Each members have their own views, and without anyone uh, just to unite the ASEAN countries. Again, I appreciate what Malaysia and Anwar already done, especially during the chairmanship. But the problem lies in the other partners, or the other members of ASEAN at the moment. And I'm sorry to say that I'm more pessimistic to looking at Indonesia than Malaysia at the moment, because Indonesia seems to be, trying to get beyond ASEAN, trying to, more active there outside. Uh, I haven't heard any words, at least coming from the Indonesian government, about the current situation between Cambodia and uh, and Thailand, for example. That's also this problem, right? So I think that would be the next step. If we cannot even deal with something inside, then how come we have one framework outside when we are dealing with BRICS? Again, ideally, as I mentioned before, I would love ASEAN to work as one united front in BRICS, because that would bring a very different narrative to BRICS, different flavor. Other countries, other partners already have some trust in ASEAN, trying to bring more ASEAN centrality. But again, it is very difficult, and probably more utopian looking at the situation at the moment inside ASEAN, with all the problems, not to mention the domestic problems of all members at the moment, right?
We are now coming close to an hour and to the end of our session today, and Radityo has already shifted his view from a very optimistic one to a slightly lesser optimistic view. But Anielo, some of your thoughts on this, about, I guess, focusing on our own backyard first before, positing our view towards the rest of the world. What do you think are some of the more pressing issues that ASEAN should focus on right now?
Well, my personal overview of this, it will be very, very pessimistic compared to Radio, because I think that ASEAN is stuck 19 maybe is still in that level. And then the proof is the Myanmar crisis now. So until now, it is a very shame there is no even an organism in ASEAN that can speak about human rights without being put in way, because we have the human rights as a creator, but it's just a voice. Nobody cares about what they say. It's the truth. The root truly about this, that ASEAN don't have any kind of organism. It might be deal with crisis, humanitarian crisis. The other question is, are ASEAN interested to do that? The answer is no, because ASEAN was not created to deal with down issue. But in the same time, all the architecture of administration is changed. So what is not changed is ASEAN. So the question is why ASEAN is not changed is a is a question that we can speak until tomorrow, and probably we will get the answer. But until now, I think also for the leader first for Anwar and the next one is to create a new kind of charter for ASEAN. It's need to create a new charter, more with an organism. I don't speak to I don't say to we need to say like European Union, because it's very different completely. But might be some kind of organism that might speak for the ASEAN community, because the other issue is the perspective for ASEAN in domestic level. There is no perspective ASEAN, because if you speak with the local people, probably don't know what is ASEAN perspective. So the ASEAN identity they also be created. It's a very issue now. So and this might be a very problematic if too much engaged with BRICS might be a challenge. So the first one is to focus on Myanmar to create an organism that might speak with the junta. The second one is to rethink ASEAN in a new level and to create a new charter for ASEAN. So
Radityo, do you agree? Do you think we have reached that critical juncture where ASEAN needs to rethink its charter, its identity?
One way, probably yes, but I would look at it in a just move or just do the simple thing first. I agree that might be discussed as well, but I think it's even more difficult probably than as Anielo mentioned. It's probably more difficult to just discuss what ASEAN would mean forward. But at the moment, again, Myanmar is one thing. The which would be very complicated. It's been years since ASEAN managed to do anything, uh, if at all, can do something there. But now there is this Cambodia, Thailand, the first or after many years, like a war or a conflict, like violent conflict broke out in Southeast Asia, and we had the experience of dealing with that before. I think Indonesia was part of the when we tried to mediate between Vietnam and Cambodia back 30 years ago. So that would be a challenge. We had the ASEAN had the experience. Indonesia had the experience to mitigate that or to mediate the conflict inside ASEAN, and this is between countries. So it is, in principle, should be uh, in comparison with the case in Myanmar, it would be easier because it's within members of ASEAN, and then it happened before. So it should be a challenge for Indonesia, but again, and Malaysia as well, because as the chairman of ASEAN, there is a way to try to mediate this. But if ASEAN cannot even do that, let alone finish, trying to do something in Myanmar, then it means that we are at a critical juncture, and we need to think about it. ASEAN always being present as this kind of zone of peace, no more conflict between countries. That's the idea since the 60s, when in the beginning of ASEAN, there are a lot of conflicts between countries in Southeast Asia before ASEAN, and now joining ASEAN, no more conflict. Again, if we cannot even solve the interstate conflict in ASEAN, we cannot even talk about intrastate conflict in Myanmar. So what is ASEAN then? So that would be I think that would need a very different dialogue, because that means ASEAN I mean, countries inside Southeast Asia might look outside ASEAN to just, to solve their own problems. Why should we trust still in ASEAN when you cannot even do something? When you have wars, when you have conflict inside or between countries and inside countries in Southeast Asia.
Thank you. A lot of very critical and interesting points raised there. Thank you so much to Radityo and Anielo for joining us, and also to Dr. Anbu Muzi for joining us earlier but had to leave us. Thank you so much to all our panelists, Anielo, Dr. Anbu Muzi, Dr. Radityo, for joining us on Dialog ASEAN25 today, unpacking some very key critical questions, of course, not just looking at BRICS as an alternative framework, but also looking at some critical questions about ASEAN and whether we've reached that critical juncture to question some of its central features and its identity. Thank you once again for joining us on Dialog ASEAN25. That's all for today with me, Nala Huda. We'll catch you another time.